When I had gone, I'd lived with my father for 3 years. I went to middle school in Ohio, and when I'd gotten back to Washington, the crack epidemic was in full swing, and the city was largely unrecognizable to me. I was an older kid, and kids my age were doing a lot of wild things that I didn't know that kids would do. I'd never seen a kid with a pager before. I didn't know anything about selling drugs or any of that shit. All I knew was every day when I went to Eastern, I didn't feel safe. I'm a quiet guy, naturally. I'm a shy person, naturally. And I used to get my hair cut on a barbershop in 15th Street Northeast, and I would go there, and everyone in the barbershop would just snap on each other. And I'd sit in the corner, and I'd watch everybody and just listen to all these jokes. The guys were funny as shit, but one day, after a few weeks of going there, getting my hair cut, they turned the jokes on me. I call that day the barbershop massacre. I lit everybody in that barbershop up. I've been sitting in there listening to for weeks talk about each other. I knew every inside joke about each and every one of them, and they couldn't believe I knew. Disgrace. Then I looked and I said, I could do that. I told my father, and my father said, well, then just do it. That's why I wouldn't even know where to start. And he said, well, look in the phone book. It's before the internet, if you're young. We used to have a book with phone numbers in it. My father found for me the local comedy club in Washington, D.C. I called him. I found out when open mic night was, and I started to go there on Tuesday nights, just watch. And then one night I went on a weekend. I would get my money together and I would go to this comedy club and I would just watch these comedians, and sometimes they would talk to me. And I told one of the comedians after a show one night, I said, man, I really want to try to do this. And he said, well, he said, if you want to be a good comedian, you should know how to act. I said, why? He says, he didn't explain it. I said, okay, and I told my parents, and this is how I came to find out about Duke Ellington, my mother. She said, there's a place you can go where you can learn to act right here in Washington. It's a high school. I said, you mean I would get out of Eastern? The school year was already in full swing, and Ellington has a policy that they don't let people just come in the middle of the year. But Linda Gravatt, who was the head of the theater department at the time, very graciously took a meeting with me and my mother, and I get emotional thinking about it. Anybody that went here, you remember what it was first like when you first walked through the door? And it was in the afternoon and everyone was in their arts classes and the girls had tutus on and everyone was weird and walking around the hallway like you weren't sure where anyone was supposed to be, and you could hear people practicing their horns and shit all through the hallways. There was art bouncing off the walls. The minute I walked through the door, there was a gallery of all these children's work, and these pictures were amazing. My first thought, when I walked through that door, I'm not good enough to be here, I'm sure. Miss Gravatt sat me down, she told me about the school, and you remember Miss Gravatt, she was very businesslike, but also very warm. She was intimidating, but palpably kind. She was a paradox of a human being. And she gave me a date for an audition. My mother said, okay, Dave, it's on you. Now, Those of you who know me know that I didn't prepare for that audition. That audition was like a possession. It was just something that I was proud to have. But as the days got closer, I'm like, oh my God, I gotta get something together. I didn't even know how to do an audition. I'd never done it before. So I went, I said, what do I need? They said a monologue. So I looked up monologue. And I went to the library, the MLK library, this huge library, so I gotta find something. And I found a piece in one of those yellow script books. It was a monologue by Mark Twain called The Judge's Spirited Woman. I learned it in a night. You know, it was not hard for me to memorize things. The next day, it was a Saturday, I think, and I came to the school, and they auditioned in what used to be this room, the original theater at Duke Ellington School of the Arts. And all the department heads sat in here, and the lights are in your eyes, and there's a bunch of kids who already go to the school who come on Saturday just to see who might be coming. And I talked to all these kids before I went in, and these kids were nothing like the kids at Easton. They were like them, but they were different. They were weird and funny and self-deprecating and things like this. And I remember I came out on stage and I did my audition, and it was like terrible. I froze up in the beginning. I started, and then I said, wait a minute, I'm messing up. Let me start again. And I was nervous. I was scared. And in the middle of the audition, I'm in the middle of the monologue, one of the teachers, Fred Leach, he said, Fred Leach, he goes, okay, that's enough. I said, well, there's still a little more. He goes, no, that is enough, he said. And I can't tell you, like, I was crushed. Without saying his disapproval, I knew it stunk. And I was right. When I walked in here, I knew I wasn't good enough to go to this school. And I thought to myself, fuck this school, that's stupid anyway. In first year theater, there's a question that they ask students from time to time. And it's a make or break question. And when you ask this question, you don't know. And the question is this. They say, why do you want to act? Now, if you say anything like, I want to be a star, you're not going to get in. I didn't know that. And I figured I already blew the audition, so I told him the truth. He said, why do you want to act? I don't. That's what I said. And they said, well, then why are you here? I said, because I want to be a comedian, and some comedian told me that if I want to be a good comedian, I need to learn how to act. And the teachers look at each other and go, thank you very much, and I left. And I was walking down the hallway, kicking rocks. There was a kid that already went here. His name was Aiko Handy. And Aiko said, hey, man, I listened to him talking about you. I said, you did? He said, you're in. I said, what? He said, you're in. Well, it didn't make any sense. Better than I could have ever imagined. I didn't have the suspicion that most new kids get. I was an oddity, new toy. It was quirky. It wasn't a snappy dresser. I didn't really know what the fuck was going on because the crack epidemic itself was new to me, and they were all refugees from their neighborhood schools. In the morning, we would have our academic classes, and then in the afternoon, we would have our arts class. It was a long school day. We started at 8:30. We wouldn't leave here at 5, sometimes 5:30, whenever they saw fit. It's funny walking in here tonight, because I saw the pride flags up. And I remember when I came here all those years ago, first time I'd ever met a kid who was just like gay. It was never strange to us. Their sexuality or their gender identity was the least remarkable thing about a person that could dance as well as Roger Bellamy. There's no distinction between any of that. Everybody weird in their own way. And in a very strange way, because we spent so much time with one another, we helped raise one another. There's a camaraderie between these students that I don't know that I've seen since I left this school. I can remember, but I can't say names. There was a student that went here that used to sell drugs. It wasn't this ace, but this particular guy. This particular guy did the cardinal no-no on the streets. He did what they call not making your roll, which meant that he got some drugs on consignment and he didn't pay whoever gave him the drugs back. Whoever gave him those drugs had declared, I'm going to come to that school and I'm going to kill you, he said. And my man was scared. The word got around school. Goons was coming. And by the time the goons showed up, every dude that went to this school, gay, straight, whatever, was all standing out front. They said, you have to kill all of us. And who was in front of all of them? Roger Bellamy with some leg warmers on like this. As I get older, I appreciate my teachers more and more. But to tell you the truth, I appreciate them then. Teacher salaries, not necessarily where they should be. It's nothing about that. Juxtaposed to the dedication that the teachers, the time they would spend, the way they would notice, are you okay? Is everything all right? You look sad today. Any little thing, like a family member would. And they foster the environment of almost absolute trust, like your parents. There's 2 lectures that I got at school. It changed the way I've become. If I turned away, switched on. And these 2 teachers, Donald Lease. Donald Lease, may he rest in peace. Maybe one of the single best educators I've ever met in my life. He had a demeanor about himself that demanded excellence from his students. He would tell us incredible stories that I didn't believe. He claimed in one class, Song Kill Him Softly was about him. I was like, nah, nigga, not you. He told me he knew Donnie Hathaway and Eric Flack and all these people, these DC legends. I'm a man, but he really demanded excellence. They gave us a lecture once on the concept of polarization. Polarization means the idea that if everybody did the same thing at the same time, your rational mind will zero. Your emotional reason will increase. He said that's how audiences work. That's how mobs work. That's how you make a person move themselves. Okay, got it. As he's saying this in the whole statement, it's an election. So everyone focus on the statement, and that's what polarization was longer than it said. Straight. Ha! Chappelle. He said, what you scared of? Oh, shit, that works. I've been married a long time. I have, man. You know, I talk a lot of shit about my wife, but I love her very much. In fact, you know, you guys wouldn't believe this about me. I'm a jealous husband. It's true. Yeah, let me tell you something. One time I thought my wife was cheating on me. Yes, nigga, yes. That was one of the worst days of my fucking life. I couldn't take it. And I'm embarrassed about it now, but I can talk about it. You know what I did? It's fucked up, but I did do this. I waited. I waited for her to fall asleep. And when I waited a long time, she's Asian. I couldn't tell if she was asleep or not. I was looking at her. And when I was sure she was asleep, you know what I did? I stole the iPhone, took it downstairs and started trying out passwords to see if I could open it. I couldn't figure out the password. Then I remembered it's iPhone. This shit has facial recognition. I was just like, oh. And that shit opened right up. And I saw a text message in there from a fella named Earl. I don't know anybody named Earl. I woke her up out of her sleep. I said, wake the fuck up. Who the fuck is Earl? And she said, David, what are you talking about? Oh, don't you play dumb with me, bitch. I done open your phone. Who is Earl? And she said, oh my God, David. That's gay Earl from the hair salon. I said, word, what am I, a dummy? How am I supposed to know this nigga is gay? And she was calm. She said, read his text and look at his pictures. I started reading the text. This fella sure does spell girl with a U a lot. And I switched over and looked at his pictures, and I couldn't believe it. This fella looked gay and still pictures. His mouth was open in every shot. And then I knew she was telling the truth. And then I felt like dumb. I said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. Here, take your phone. I'm sorry. Just go back to sleep. I'm sorry. I guess I just been insecure because all this cheating I've been doing. Good night. And she didn't let me leave. She said, well, since you want to wake a bitch up, and then she pulled my phone from under her pillow. I said, what the fuck? She said, who is this bitch in this picture? I said, how'd you open that phone? She said, it was easy, nigga. All I had to do was mash my nose and go like this, and it opened right up. I said, what the fuck? I'm gonna close the night with a long story. Do you mind? No. All right, it's a long one, so pretend that I finished, because I gotta go get a cigarette, all right? I'm not done, but just act like it. I would prefer staying in the Oceans by acting. Thank you very much. Good night. Thanks for not giving me a standing O, motherfuckers. This is the worst. It's all right. It's all right. I just wanted... Before I did Killing Them Softly, when I was 22, HBO gave me the biggest opportunity of my life at that time. They gave me a half-hour special, but this shit was not like a special, you know what I mean? It was like, it was generic. It didn't even have a title. It was just Dave Chappelle. And I shot it in San Francisco at a place called Broadway Studios, which is on the second floor of a building. And beneath Broadway Studios is a nightclub. And the special was only supposed to be 30 minutes. And I got ready, I practiced, I did all the shit I was supposed to do. And the night that I taped, 20 minutes into my 30-minute set, I'll never forget this, music music started blasting from the nightclub underneath. You could hear it real loud, and it fucked my whole show up, and I was devastated. I was a young man. I really believed in what I was doing, and I thought that my dream had been killed. So when I got off stage, I ran down the steps to the alley behind Broadway Studios and where the control trucks are parked, and I kicked that motherfucking door open, and I started yelling at all the producers. I was nobody in show business, just a guy that believed in us. I said, man, you fucked everything up. That fucking music, what the fuck were you thinking? And there was a guy who was a big-time producer, I ain't saying no names, and he stood up, and he said, hey, kid, sit the fuck down. He said, we didn't ruin anything. He said, we made a deal with that nightclub to not play music, and they didn't honor the deal. And I said, who didn't honor the deal? And he pointed to a guy. I'll never forget it. It was an old white man sitting in the Ford Taurus by himself. And he said, that guy right there. And I didn't waste no time or ask no questions. I went to that Ford Taurus, and I beat on that window, and I said, open the door, motherfucker, I want to talk to you. And that old man looked at me for 1 second and wisely drove the fuck off. And left me in the alley cussing at anybody who would listen. And 2 minutes later, literally 120 seconds later, couldn't have been any more than that, the doors of the kitchen in the alley of that nightclub underneath Broadway Studios flung open. And that old man was standing there, that same old man with reinforcements. He had 2 big goons with him, and he looked at me, and he was calm as a cucumber. He said, you, come here. I want to talk to you. I didn't know anything about the streets at this age. But I found out later in my life that these men were Russian mobsters. And I don't know what you guys know about the Russian mob, but these are the niggas that killed Denzel in Training Day. And all the producers knew what I was up against. They said, Dave, do not go in there. And I said, fuck y'all. And I walked right into that kitchen, and they closed the doors behind me, and it got dark as fuck in there. And I knew, I'm not dumb, I knew I was in a bad situation. But you have to understand, I believed in what I was doing, and I didn't give a fuck. Just kept cussing at these motherfuckers, telling them how they ruined my life. And that old man couldn't believe that I was talking all this shit. And as soon as I took a breath, he stopped me gently. He said, hey, kid, listen. Your friends lied to you. He said, we made a deal, but your friends never paid me. And when he said that, I realized I was locked in a kitchen. I realized he was telling the truth, which would make me wrong. And the very moment that I realized I was wrong, for the first time, I was afraid. You see, it's a funny thing if you believe you're absolutely right. You can get drunk off the feeling of how right you are. That's why gay people are so mean. But I didn't buckle. You guys would have been very proud of me. I was scared, but I didn't buckle. I said, well then, sir, I owe you an apology. But I believe that no matter what reason that music was playing, it ruined my life. And that old man looked at me with sympathy in his eyes. And he walked over to me and he gently placed his hand on my cheek, which I gotta tell you, is a very emasculating thing to do. I was standing there looking at this nigga's hand on my cheek like that. And he said, you are a real man. And he tapped me on my cheek. Real soft. Just like that. The doors opened back up. The light from the alley flooded into the kitchen. And I just walked out alive. I lived to fight another day. And couldn't wait to get out of D.C. When I was 17, I moved to New York and lit that comedy scene up. I was obviously talented. You'll hear stories about people saying that I discovered Dave Chappelle. It's like saying you discovered sunshine. I was shining on everybody. And when I got in that professional world, I was oddly prepared. I had a sense of professionalism. I showed up on time. I did the things that I learned in school to do, just the basics. My career didn't have any direction because I was still so young. And that didn't change for many years. It didn't change until my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, told me she was pregnant. And I was like, you know what? I should really start taking this seriously. When she told me that, before the baby was born, I had done my first HBO special, and then I went to work on a sketch comedy show idea I had, and Chappelle show came out. When my son was still maybe 18 months years old. And I bet on myself. I took less money. I remember that, so I could do what I wanted to do. I said, you don't have to pay me that much, but you can't ever tell me that I can't do what I want to do. I did the first season, I'll tell you, for $300,000. Which sounds like a lot of money, but. It was a rare experience in my life because it was the first time that I did something that was so successful that I knew I had exceeded their expectations. I was more successful than I felt like I was supposed to be. They didn't plan on that. The second season came out and was a juggernaut, and then I remember this was the single best day of my career. The Rick James episode of Chappelle Show had come out. People were going crazy about the Rick James episode. At the same time, the DVD for season 1 of Chappelle Show dropped. It was the first time any television show had ever been sold off air, and it sold 1 million copies in the first day. It was unheard of. To this day, nothing has sold more than Chappelle Show. It's still on the top 10 in Netflix. All those great things happened, and my contract was up. Clearly, I was about to be rich. I'll spare you all the details of why it didn't work out. I didn't think so either. That's why I like working for Netflix. I like working for Netflix because when all those bad things happened to me, that company didn't even exist. And when I found out they were streaming Chappelle's show, I was furious. How could they not know? So you know what I did? I called them and I told them that this makes me feel bad. And do you want to know what they did? They agreed that they would take it off their platform just so I could feel better. That's why I fuck with Netflix, because they paid me my money. They do what they say they're going to do, and they went above and beyond what you could expect from a businessman. They did something just because they thought that I might think that they were wrong. And I do. I think if you are fucking streaming that show, you're fencing stolen goods. They stole that from me. They just took it. And I'm not up here trying to tell you guys that I believe that Comedy Central gave me a raw deal just because I'm black. I believe that they gave me a raw deal because this fucking industry is a monster. It's the same monster that these Me Too bitches was trying to tell you about. But they hate the monster for how it fucks. And I hate that monster for how it eats. But my God, man, it's the same monster. And I ended up doing something that no one had ever seen before, including myself. Maybe Prince is the only other guy that I've seen do this, where he just quit something that was popular when you're at the very top of it. Lucky for me, when I quit, I went to Africa, so there was a media storm that I didn't hear. By the time I got back, everyone was just looking at me crazy. That was a very difficult decision to make. The entire world told me I was crazy, but I was sure I was being true to myself and to something that I learned at Ellington. I'm one of those comedians that thought of himself as an artist. I was enamored by what the genre could do. It was like the pictures that I could paint with words and the way I could engage with audiences. I understood as it was happening. I was very lucky to be able to do this. And I protected that. And I knew that if I took the money, they would expect me to behave differently. And I wasn't willing to accept that. So I quit. And when I quit, it was a very difficult time in my life that I'll spare you the details, but man, fuck show business. It was tough. And then one day I was in Panama City, Panama, and I was at a hotel, and I looked at the lobby. There was a painting of Abraham Lincoln. And I would look closer. It wasn't a painting. It was all pennies, just pennies, on a black canvas arranged into the face of Abraham Lincoln. And I asked the guy, I said, how much is that painting worth? He said, $600,000, sir. And I looked at the pennies that made up the painting, and I was like, that's like $300 worth of pennies. A light bulb went in my head. I realized the value of art. And some of the biggest wars and crimes and scandals in history were financed. The theft of art. Art is a powerful commodity. And artists, if you're good at it, never behave. It's a commodity. It's a tough one. And then I gave up. I said, oh, this is probably it. I accepted the fact that the career I thought I was going to have was over, but I started to rediscover just my heart for its own sake. Those comedy clubs, I'm working way less money than I ever had, and I enjoyed it more than anyone I ever did. I was the best work I'll ever do. Being so honest, and so sincere. There was no media, there was no studio, there was no TV, just me and the crowds. And night after night, and slowly but surely, the crowds got bigger and bigger. And then suddenly people started to notice. Hosts would say, Dave Chappelle has the tour of the year. And again, the year after that, and the year after that. And then, Lauren Michael asked me to do Saturday Night Live. And it wasn't just like he asked me. He was courting me. I didn't even know it. He gave me this one long speech. He said, all right. And I read some book about Lauren Michael's starting Saturday Night Live. And I read the speech that he gave Richard Pryor when he wanted him to host the show. And I said, holy shit, that's the same shit he said to me. And I did it. That was an enormous amount of pleasure. It had been 12 years since I'd been on television, since I'd even talked to the media. And I remember I signed my Netflix contract on my way to my mark to the monologue. If you do live television, they count down every second. 30 seconds. Are you sure this time it's good to say things. 22 seconds. Oh, man, you better not be tricking me. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I walked out on that stage. And it was natural. It was nothing. It was easy work. I never forget my food. First thing I won. And when I walked on the stage, after being in the cold for so long, for the first time when I walked on stage, I'm like, damn, it's me. When I quit the show, all my friends would say, well, fuck them, Dave. Why don't you just do Chappelle's show at another network? Yeah. And why doesn't a slave run from one plantation to another plantation? Because the master over there might be nicer. My God, man, I was strapped. I'll tell you the truth. I've even thought about coming back, doing another Chappelle show. Well, but if I do, I can't call it Chappelle Show because my name and likeness is being used by them in perpetuity throughout the universe. It's in the contract. You're not supposed to do this in my business. I'm up doing something nobody else is doing. I'm telling you something that you need to know. I'm trying to explain to you what you're seeing. You don't understand what I am publicly wrong. And I know that this network and they watch and they get this thing. Why are you doing this? So good. That feel good to be ball public. Oh, to me, I know. I know exactly how that feels. When I quit my show, they said I was crazy. What was crazy about it? I just didn't want to do it anymore. They said I smoked crack. That's impossible. I was a devout Muslim. I didn't smoke before drink. But I do now, bitch, because you ruined my fucking life.